Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me. So, how about you tell me, who are you in the SCA?
I am known in the SCA as Vadoma. There is a joke around that I am just Vadoma. I'm registered as Matressa Marinator, and that's all part of my persona. I have several different names. Known as Vadoma.
When did you join the SCA? How long have you been playing?
I joined the SCA. I started going to my first events in 2012. I had an underage daughter who wanted to fight. And so when we go to events together, it's really interesting because people automatically assume that I've been playing for 30 years and she grew up in the SCA and she's like a second gen. In reality, it's the reverse. She brought me into it, not the other way around. She was underage. She wanted to fight. She wanted to go to war. The only way for her to go to war was for me to sign this medical release waiver. And I had all of these people I didn't know, had never met before, saying, oh, it's no big deal. Just sign this medical release waiver for your 16-year-old daughter. And I was like, no, that doesn't fly with me. How about I go with you and see what this is all about? She, my plan was to put up with it until she turned 18 and she could go by herself and make her own decisions. And here I am.
So how many years total have you been in the SCA?
8. So I started in March of 2012. I've been playing for 8 years. A bunch of people I didn't know, they were doing all these really strange things. I was like, I can't handle this. She really, really, really wanted to go to war. And it was like a 5-day war. It's pretty significant. So I said, fine, I'll go with you. I just threw a bunch of garb together so I'd have something to wear for 5 days. Camped with the local group, which was not, I had issues. Let's just say that we didn't mesh well. I didn't mesh with the local group as well as I have with other groups. And so I was just going, but I knew them, right? At least knew their names. That was June because I went to my first event in April. And this was June, so I didn't know anything. As part of that group, a peer, a pelican, Mistress Nina, she looked at me and she said, you don't know anything about the SCA? And I said, no. And so bless her heart, and I say that sincerely, she took me under her wing and she took me on a tour of the campsite, a tour of war. We went to the Kingdom Royal site. She introduced me to a bunch of people. I don't even remember who they are, but I'm pretty sure I was introduced to their majesties. I was introduced to several baronages. I was introduced to, she walked me down Merchant Row, pointed out her favorite merchants and why they were her favorite merchants. We walked through the A&S area. She showed me how to sign up for classes. We actually watched a couple of classes just for a couple of minutes, and then we went on. She took me to the fighting area. She took me to the archery area. She took me to the thrown weapons area. She did the full gamut and spent probably almost 3 hours with me. It's a small war, small site, but it still took a while to get through all of these locations. She showed me the dream. And I've not looked back. I know exactly what I want to do. I did, the minute I committed to, I'm going to play this game, I knew exactly what I wanted my persona to be. I didn't have to think about it. I did have to search for a name, but I knew exactly what I wanted my persona to be. I knew exactly how I was going to play my persona. I just haven't looked back. And that's how I got started. But I went. It was my daughter's fault that I went. It was Mistress Nina's fault that I stayed. And now my goal is to do both of those, bring people and help them stay.
You knew what you were going to do with your persona at that first event.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, because that seems like the hook for you.
It really was. A little bit of background for me is I have had serious cases of wanderlust before I even knew what wanderlust was. I mean, I grew up in a very small town. We are talking population 400. I'm not kidding. 400, not 4,000, not 40,000, 400. My graduating class from high school was 197 people from an entire county. It wasn't just one town. It was about 12 different small towns crunched together in this really small high school. Fewer than 200 people in my graduating class. So the high school itself was 650, maybe. Very, very tight-knit community. If you've lived in a small town, you know what that means. If you haven't, that's for another day. I was about 8 years old, maybe 8 to 10 years old. The first time I went to my parents and said, yeah, I'm kind of done with this place. Can we move? And my parents were like, you don't just pick up and move. And I said, well, why not? They're like, well, our house is here. Our jobs are here. Our family's here. And I was like, but can we move anyway? My parents still live in the house that they moved into 52 years ago. They're still in that same house. The minute I graduated from high school, I went to a year of college, and then I went and worked in a national park for a year, and then I went back to college, and then I moved. I knew immediately I wanted my persona to be allowed to have the same wanderlust. I knew immediately I was going to play a Romani. So Romani, Roma, Rom, any of those terminology. I knew immediately that that's what I was going to do. What I didn't know is I had to research what region I wanted to be from and how that translated into a name, how that translated into the garb that I wore, how that translated into, what I did. That's still evolving, and it's going to continue to evolve until I die. My persona has never changed. My name has never changed. I mean, I was able to find Vadoma quite quickly. If you know anything about the Rom, there's 3 names. There's your super secret name that was picked you at birth that protects you from the evil spirits. There's your family name, which is Vadoma. And then it took me a long time to get my government registered name. That was the name that I struggled with. And I finally went to a good friend of mine and said, will you please name me? And she goes, what are you talking about? I said, I can't pick the name. Your persona is within the region that I want to be from. It's the same time period. You've researched names. Will you please name me? And through a couple of different false starts and everything, my registered SCA name is Meredudd, which is really fantastic because nader is actually the German word for needle. So there's a connection back to embroidery and part of who I am as a person. And then Mary is the name that she picked. So through a couple of combinations and discussions. So Meredudd is a German name, 15th century, which is when I would have been born and could be one of the regions that I was born in. So it was very easy to kind of pick that name. It passed with flying colors. Like I went to a consultation. They were like, oh yeah, I mean, within 10 minutes, they said, yeah, we can document this. And they even filled out the paperwork for me. And I said, here's my $10. Let's just get this done. It was really fantastic. But what I did struggle with is registering a device because I had 2 elements that I really, really wanted. One was a tortoise, and one, because that's my personal mascot totem, it has been for 20 plus years. It's just, there's some aspects of that animal that what I strive for. So it's just been part of my life for a long time. So I absolutely wanted a tortoise. And because the Rom travel, my home was my fire, right? Not a fireplace, campfire. And I wanted those 2 things, but all I got from the heralds was either a fire with tortoise on top, so it was cooking them. I was like, I don't want turtle soup. No, turtle soup. Or they would put the tortoise on the bottom and the fire up above, so then the tortoise was breathing fire. And I'm like, it's not a fire-breathing tortoise. It's not a cooked tortoise. Aren't there any other options? And I had this discussion for years. I was like, are there no other options? Are there no other options? I was making a bunch of veil pins. I have a set of veil pins that are tortoises that are on their side. And I usually line them up so it looks like 3 or 4 turtles. So I just made a joke, marching turtles. I was like, well, that actually would work. What if I did like a semi of tortoises, and that's like my, and I was like, well, that's more a device. I don't know what to do, and it still doesn't have the fire. And then for some reason, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I had this image of a circle of tortoises, right? Which is a nod to marching turtles, is a nod to a compass rose, which is also kind of part of it. So I waited very impatiently until about 9. And then I messaged our Kingdom Herald and I said, can I do this? And he said, yeah, you can do a circle of tortoises. I can't find a conflict with that anywhere. And I said, okay, can I put a fire in the middle of it? And he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, can I put a fire in the middle of my tortoises? And he goes, flame proper? And I said, yes. So it doesn't have the wood at the bottom. It's literally a flame, but it is variegated between red and yellow. So I have the flame with my, now I call them now they're not marching turtles anymore. Now they're dancing turtles. I wanted to be very, very careful because the Rom are still to this day, they're a very persecuted group. A lot of people call them by what would be slang, but is actually a derogatory statement. I refuse to use that word when people are like, when they don't know what a Rom is, I help them go to appropriate websites and appropriate sources to learn what that is. What I love about my persona, the way you play a Rom is you pick your region of where you want to be from. And it can be a very small region within a modern day country. It can be a very large region. My region is the Baltic states in late 15th century. So starting at about 1475, around in there. In the Baltic states, I can pull from later Ukrainian, Germany, Poland, Estonia, Latvia. I don't go down any further than Ukraine because at that time period, the Rom were actually sold into slavery in Hungary and Romania and those other countries. So I don't go there just because that, my persona would have stayed away from those countries in that time period because, who wants to be sold into slavery? So what's really great about dressing this persona is because they traveled and because they would have traveled in all of these different regions, you can pick up a Polish coat, a Ukrainian shirt, a German skirt, a Russian headdress. You can pick up whatever you want and wear them all together, all at the same time. And you kind of make those garblers go, and you go, I can prove that this is okay. And so that's kind of fun. I picked that region because of the embroidery that was done during that time frame and that style of embroidery. I just fell in love with it. I do a lot of other styles of embroidery, but I specifically really like that. I also take a lot of liberties with my persona in that not only am I kind of grabbing things from that area, but I also time travel a lot and I just mix everything and wear it all together. And if you're looking for a person that is strictly playing their persona, there's an amazing person in Vadoma, Pesha, who is fantastic. She lives and breathes this persona and she is amazing and she teaches classes on it all the time. She's a wonderful, wonderful resource.
Other than borrowing clothes to bring your persona to life and some of your arts, I'm sure, what are some other things that you do to bring your persona out when you're playing?
I haven't done it a lot as much lately. There's a lot of journals. So I actually have this really fantastic book. It's just hundreds and hundreds of pages of literally a bibliography. When you go through that, you read a lot about a writ of passage. And this is something that one of these days I really, really, really want somebody to gift me with a writ of passage. As these groups started migrating from India through Italy and up into Spain and then up into Northern Europe, right? They would take with them a writ of passage, and it was signed by monarchies that they were signed by. It wasn't always signed by the same person. But as you can imagine, there were a lot of forgeries of writs of passage once they discovered the value of having a writ of passage. So a writ of passage would allow these groups, whether they were small groups or family groups, and sometimes they would have small groups of like 4 or 5 people and large groups of 30 or 40 people, would come into a town, and if they had a writ of passage, what they did is a writ of passage required the town to offer them hospitality. So they would come into these towns with these writs of passage. They would eat them out of house and home and then pick up and leave, and wouldn't necessarily clean up after themselves, and they would leave. And the poor towns were devastated. These writs of passage pretty much gave them free reign to go anywhere they wanted. One of these days I would get a writ of passage signed by a current monarch, wherever I happen to be. The other thing too in this bibliography is you read a lot of journal accounts how this group was entertainers, right? So they would tell stories. They were later in history, they were animal trainers. So they would have the bears. But you read a lot about the ladies of the towns going down to get their fortunes read, and going down to the camps to get their fortunes read, which were very much early on. It would have been palm reading and maybe some rune reading, and then later it developed into tarot reading, fortune from the tarot. Because I'm later period, I would have been a tarot reader as basically an entertainer. But what's fantastic about the journal accounts is all the ladies dress in their finest gowns to go down to the camp to get their fortunes told. And when they come back, they find that there's been holes cut in their gowns. Their change purses have been cut. And so the group of people were collecting pieces of fabrics and coins, and they would send their kids out, to do their business. And so one of the things that I do is, because of those, I wear a lot of patchwork clothes, because they didn't have time to make their clothes. They didn't have time to do a lot of embroidery. They didn't have time to do all that. They didn't have leisure time. They were trying to survive. I try not to make my own garb. I try to get other people to make my garb. And it really blows their minds, because people that want to make garb want to make it to fit perfectly. And I'm saying, no, you can't fit perfectly. It needs to not fit me, and I need to put in a big fat hem to take it in, or I need to, something. It's hard for them to wrap their heads around that idea. But I would have never had clothes made to me, because I would have never stayed in a place long enough to have a fitting and to have a shell and have it fit and have multiple fittings and stuff. So I need clothing and garb that I could just quickly grab, that was either given to me like from a mission, or something that I could grab off a clothesline, or something, like that. So clothes don't fit me. So I have a lot of kind of subtle nuances that I use that most people don't notice and pay attention to. So my clothes are not made to fit me. Depending on where I am, especially if I'm at war, I wear pants underneath the skirt. So if I need to pick up my skirt and run, or if I need to walk through undergrowth or a forest or something like that, I'm covered. I do carry tarot cards. I pull them out every once in a while. I am by far not an expert tarot reading. I do have some pouches that have bells on them so people can't steal my stuff. I also have a belt that has lots of stuff on it. I have knives. I have pouches that I can hide things in. I put pockets in everything so I can put stuff in my pockets. If you look at the paintings, they're very romanticized and mostly inaccurate. And I found one painting that I feel absolutely accurately portrays the people. One couple of wood carvings that I'm like, yeah, okay, I can get behind that one. But for the most part, very romanticized, not necessarily accurate. You just kind of have to think about, well, if I was actually this person living in this time frame, how would I survive? How would I get clothes? How would I get food? How would I find safety?
I believe you have a laurel, do you not?
I do.
What is your laurel in?
My laurel is for embroidery, specifically for cut work and lace work is what I'm known for. I do all styles of embroidery though. I've done brick stitch, Elizabethan, I've done all versions of surface embroidery, applique. My heart and soul just loves cut work. Anytime I can cut a hole in a piece of fabric and then fill that hole with just beautiful, intricate designs, my heart is just happy.
If you were speaking to a brand new person who's coming into the SCA, the first couple events, what would be the number one piece of advice that you would give them?
My number one piece of advice is absolutely have an open mind. Do not necessarily follow your first impression. I've rarely found anyone that currently plays in the SCA whose first impression was 100% positive. Like, it just doesn't happen. We are a very, very weird group of people. We're all weird in different ways, and then you put us together and our weirdness is just amplified. We also have these really strange knowledges where we know something and we really know something, and we don't get to talk about this something very often because our significant other, our children, our parents, our family could care less. And so when we get together, we have a tendency to share exuberantly our very specific knowledges, right? And it can be very overwhelming. So I very rarely have found somebody whose first impression was 100% positive. And like I said, that was the way I started. I was like, I'm out of here. You know, I was counting the months when my daughter turned 18, and I was like, I'm out. And then I had a very kind person who explained the dream to me, and I haven't looked back. So keep an open mind. And honestly, if you end up with a group that you don't click with, play with a different group. I played more, even in both kingdoms, I played more outside my local group than inside my local group. And my contacts and the people that became my dearest friends, none of them were in either. Well, I have one. I will say I have one. And she actually, I took a belt from her for a protege's belt for a pelican last year. She was in my local group. But very few of the people that become my dearest friends are in my local group. So the SCA is huge. And the SCA is big in diversity of people and diversity of ideas, diversity of talents, diversity of areas of expertise. It is massive. And the beautiful joy of social media and online options, you can meet and interact and become really good friends with people even outside your kingdom. Forget about outside your local group, like outside your kingdom. So keep an open mind and know that there's so much out there. And also, what a great opportunity to learn new things. I'll be doing embroidery until I die, but my exposure to the SCA has said, have you thought about glass blowing or stain? And I'm like, yeah, I'll never set up a furnace for glass blowing, but stained glass, now, there's something I can get behind. There's so many different things that you can try and do. That's the other great thing about the SCA is because we're a teaching society and because everybody has this plethora of knowledge they're willing to share, there's always classes, and usually for free or for cost, very minimal cost. When I look mundanely at taking like a gold work class, you're paying $250, $300 for a gold work class. And then I turn around and I go to an SEA event, a person who's teaching a gold work class for $10. Guess which one I'm going to go to? And yeah, it's not the in-depth whatever, but you get enough supplies to cover it. You get an introduction. I usually just need enough to get me started. And yeah, sign me up for those classes. Yeah, I'm on board. Sign me up for that. Outside of the SEA, I wouldn't do any of that. None of that. take advantage of these opportunities, because you don't, like I said, $10 for a gold work class, $250 for a gold work class. Take advantage of that. Learn from these people that are expertise. And even if they're not expertise and they themselves are just learning, I guarantee you can still learn something from them.
Well, I am going to draw this to a close, but thank you so much for joining us today. I believe that anybody who listens to you is going to find that fire and passion, because you're definitely dripping with it.
I love it. I love it. You know, it took me a long time to find the group. And once I found it and I understood it, I was like, yeah, this is my crazy, insane tribe of people that I belong to. My name is Vadoma. That's what we call it. That's what my family calls me. And that's what all of you can call me too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Vadoma. I really appreciated your time today. Thank you.